Is this working? Ladies and gentlemen, can we please recognize the arrival of the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, our apologies for the late start. I understand the Governor General will be with us shortly, so we can prepare. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of Their Excellencies, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General, and the Most Honorable Lady Allen. Please remain standing for the playing of the Jamaican National Anthem. Thank you. You may be seated as we invite Dr. Lengworth Anglin, Chairman of the Governance Committee of the National Partnership Council, to open the proceedings with prayer.
Thank you very much, Professor. And good afternoon, everybody, Your Excellencies and Prime Minister and Opposition Leader and all the others of us. I was just recounting that I have had the privilege of doing this prayer at every signing agreement so far. And I have been at most meetings, and we have continued in prayer, not just out of formality, but because we recognize that except the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord watch the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. Let us pray. Our precious God, we continue to give you thanks that you watch over us, you provide for us, you take care of us, you guide us, you lead us. We continue to recognize that you are a sovereign ruler and that you are in control. So we gather in this place, in this manner, for this purpose. And we know that you are present with us. And we ask now that you'll accept our thanks for all who have served in the past, those who have pioneered and labored, so that we can have another signing, another agreement signed, even in your presence. Guide us through this session together, and may we not only benefit from this session for today, but may Jamaica land we love benefit from the deliberations of today and subsequent deliberations. For our aim is that Jamaica should continue to grow and prosper. We give you thanks for guiding us now, and thank you for your providing hand. And we just continue to trust you as we pray in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Your Excellencies, Sir Patrick Allen, Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General of Jamaica, Most Honorable Lady Allen, Most Honorable Andrew Honis, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Mr. Mark Golding, MP, Leader of the Jamaican Opposition, Mr. Floyd Green, the Minister with responsibility for the National Partnership Council, Cabinet members, and members of the National Partnership Council and other invited guests. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this ceremony this afternoon. I want to begin by thanking their excellencies, because this is the third consecutive occasion at which they have allowed us to enter into their house to have this signing ceremony. We are truly appreciative. I want to thank the staff members of the Office of the Prime Minister and the National Partnership Council Secretariat, and I would single out Mrs. Donaldson, Merle Donaldson, and Mrs. Suzanne Leslie Bailey for recognizing the appropriate symbolism of having a national partnership comprising representatives from across the society, the symbolism of having such a signing at the residence and office of the country's head of state. I want to focus my remarks this afternoon not so much on the content of past agreements and the current agreement, but on the process of social dialogue and social partnership. And this is not because we have not had achievements coming out of past agreements. We've had achievements. We've also had a colossal failure. And that failure, of course, has been our inability as a country to effectively stem our crime epidemic. There's one argument that suggests if the dialogue process is not leading to apparently a solution to our most pressing challenge, then maybe we should stop talking. But that argument ignores the counterfactual. And the counterfactual really is what would have been Jamaica's experience over the course of its independent history in the absence of efforts at bipartisan and social dialogue, and its respect for the transition from one administration to another. We have hints from elsewhere in the world where national protests have absolutely stymied the efforts of countries to progress. We have not, in Jamaica, seen significant levels of national protest over the last several decades. And there's also really good news on top of the bad news that I started with in terms of the failure. And the good news is that Jamaica's political leaders, despite perspectives that might suggest otherwise, have been ardent proponents of social and bipartisan dialogue. And you say, where's the evidence of that? And I'm going to provide a number of anecdotes, experiences, recognizing that if you get enough anecdotes, what you start to get is data and data patterns. And I'm going to begin with the chronology of Jamaica's post-independent political leaders, with the exception of only three, two of whom have been determined to be national heroes. We have 10 other political leaders in Jamaica who have not yet achieved the designation of national hero. And I'm going to draw experiences from 9 of those, starting with the most honorable Hugh Lawson Shearer. In 1997, Hugh Lawson Shearer, then 74 years old, joined a small group of individuals from the trade union movement and from the private sector. That group was called ACORN. And the meeting 25 years ago, presided over by Ward Mills, who is with us today, brought together Hugh Shearer and a number of his colleagues to begin the social dialogue group called ACORN. Now, what was interesting about Hugh Shearer's involvement is he was 25 years past his prime ministerial tenure, 74 years old, still thought it necessary to come together to be a part of the solution to Jamaica's efforts to engage in social dialogue. And that was not the only committee on which he served. He served on the Trade Policy Committee of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica as a former prime minister, 25 years beyond his prime ministerial tenure. He found the time and the interest to come together with colleagues from the private sector and the trade union movement to think about Jamaica's trade policy in the spirit of social dialogue. And that group, called ACORN, has been very much involved in Jamaica's social dialogue efforts since then. And it has thought hard about how to help to catalyze a national partnership in Jamaica. And in 2003, it recognized in a paper that it developed that despite the competitive advantages of Jamaica, and with all the best intentions and work of the country's leadership, Jamaica wasn't fulfilling the development aspirations of its people at a rate at which anyone can be comfortable. And I am speaking from the document. And it identified a litany of problems which, as it indicated, like too many of Jamaica's citizens, have been bulleted below. And it went on to identify these problems, but then to point out that it was willing and able and interested in helping to catalyze social partnership in Jamaica. The record and involvement of the Most Honorable Hugh Shearer was echoed by many of Jamaica's post-independent leaders. Prior to 1997, Edward Seaga and Michael Manley had been critical to the establishment of Jamaica's most successful partnership effort, the bipartisan effort that started in 1979 with the establishment of the Electoral Advisory Committee to help to rid Jamaica of its problems of electoral malpractice through a bipartisan and a social dialogue effort. P.J. Patterson continued this tradition in 1989, when in 1989, in his role as Minister of Development, he took to Cabinet a paper that established a National Planning Council. And when you look back at that paper, it is replete with the concern about establishing social dialogue as a mechanism to deal with Jamaica's problems. And the National Planning Council met consistently from 1989 through to 2007, typically headed by the Minister of Finance. Prime Minister Patterson continued this process in the mid-1990s when he supported directly and personally the National Industrial Policy effort that included as one of its fundamental cornerstones the importance of Jamaica establishing a national social partnership as a key enabler to restoring our competitiveness and our fiscal balances. That partnership didn't occur then, but the process continued. And so in 2007, Prime Minister Bruce Golding institutionalized the partnership framework in the context of a consultative committee on social partnership, which was followed by the establishment in 2010 of the organization that is now dedicated to Jamaica's social partnership efforts, the National Partnership Council. In that context, Prime Minister Golden oversaw the first social partnership agreement, the Partnership Code of Conduct, in 2011. Prime Minister Simpson Miller continued this tradition in using her political capital in support of the country's fiscal reform efforts that were an important element of the social partnership considerations, followed in 2013 when, in this very room, there was a signing of Jamaica's first content-based social partnership agreement, the Partnership for Jamaica. Prime Minister Simpson Miller also directly oversaw a key social partnership-driven entity, the Electricity Sector Enterprise Team, with the goal of rehabilitating Jamaica's aging electricity infrastructure. She took personal ownership of the formation of that entity. And then Prime Minister Honus continued. But even before he continued as Prime Minister, he was very much supportive of social dialogue efforts in his capacity as Leader of the Opposition. So in 2013, when the Partnership for Jamaica was being contemplated, he expressed his support for the agreement, and he also supported the Electricity Sector Enterprise Team process, as the team members would meet with him periodically to update him on progress. This was, of course, followed by Prime Minister Honus in his capacity as Prime Minister, overseeing the signing and the formation of Jamaica's second partnership agreement, the Partnership for a Prosperous Jamaica, in 2016, but also other initiatives. There's a lot of discussion about the crime consensus. Prime Minister Honus was essential to the architecture that led to the formation of CMARC. And he, along with Dr. Chang, in the absence of their full support to that process, it would not have been initiated. But the process continued. So Peter Phillips, in his capacity as Minister of National Security, was fully supportive of social dialogue efforts, as he was in his capacity as Leader of the Opposition. And when he was concerned that the crime consensus was not gathering sufficient momentum, he led a crime consensus discussion and retreat with the objective of moving that process forward. And then we have Leader of the Opposition, Mark Golden, who has been extraordinarily committed to these partnership efforts. When he served as Minister for Justice in the Simpson-Miller administration, he was fully supportive of all of the legislative efforts that were required to move our partnership processes forward, whether it related to the issues of fiscal reform or to the issue of campaign financing reform overseen by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, or to the transformation of our electricity infrastructure captured in elements of the 2015 Electricity Act. Mark Golden was there along the way, and he was there on July 30th, 2019, at the conference that Leader of the Opposition, Peter Phillips, held on the issue of the crime consensus. So, Your Excellency, one of the things that is right with Jamaica is the fact that our political leaders, for decades, have been supportive of bipartisan and social dialogue. But the journey needs to continue. All is not well with Jamaica. The litany of challenges that were captured in 2003 in that Acorn paper are largely still there. Because I exceeded my time, I won't read them out. But they're there. Many of us, all of us, when we die and they're celebrating our funerals, you'll see a dash between the birth date and the death date. We're all committed to, through our dashes, be as critical as we can to the meeting of the development aspirations of our colleagues and friends. As we today sign another partnership agreement that continues the dash between the first agreement in 2011 and the future, let us commit, each and every one of us, as we participate in this signing ceremony today, to work as hard as we can so that history will treat the social partnership dash very, very kindly. At this time, I invite His Excellency Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General of Jamaica, to welcome us to his house.
Thank you, Prof. The Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, Mr. Mark Golding, Leader of the Opposition, members of Cabinet, and members of Parliament, National Partnership Council members, Reverend Dr. Lenworth Anglin, heads of agencies and departments, members of the private sector, representatives of civil society, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome each one of you to King's House for another significant event in our national life. 9 years ago, on the 31st of July 2013, the first social partnership agreement was signed in this room by representatives of the government, the trade unions, private sector, and civil society. From what I recall, this Partnership for Jamaica agreement was intended to create a national dialogue and consensus on issues relating to economic growth and development. The second agreement, the Partnership for a Prosperous Jamaica, was signed here in December 2016. That agreement signaled a renewal of the previous mission and was a further commitment to the priority areas of economic growth and job creation, public sector transformation for efficiency and effectiveness, adherence to the rule of law, and enhanced tourism. Today, the third partnership agreement for Jamaica's strong and sustainable recovery is to be signed. This will focus on prosperity, peace, people, planet, and partnership. I commend the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the representatives of civil society, labor unions, and the private sector who signed the first two agreements, and encourage those who will continue to carry the process forward. I suspect that the COVID-19 pandemic would have adversely affected the ability to achieve some of the goals of the last agreement. However, while we had little control over what happened, we should not allow adversity to derail our intentions. There are instances in life when things may not go our way. But if we press along like Archimedes, we too will have our eureka moments. And we can surge forward to success with buoyancy. We cannot allow the wrongs to deluge us. Let us take the advice of our Jamaican poet laureate, Claude McKay, as he said, we may be pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. Never give up. The partnership agreements, to some extent, recognize that there are, as you mentioned, Prof., that there are things that are wrong with Jamaica that must be fixed. The concept of the partnership agreements, I suspect, are built on the simple premise that a house that is divided against itself cannot stand. One individual, I am told, in a group of hunters that went out to look for food, they shot an elephant and they were carrying it back to their camp. And while they were carrying back the elephant, they were all shouting, "We killed the elephant. We killed the elephant." But there was one man, apparently his arrow got to its mark, and he thought that he alone killed the elephant. So while they were saying, "We killed the elephant," he was saying, "I killed the elephant." Understandably, the others got frustrated and left him alone to carry the elephant home. Of course, you know that was just an act of futility. When he recognized that he alone couldn't carry the elephant home, he joined the others in carrying the elephant and in chanting, "We killed the elephant." And they got home and they were successful in their exploits. We are going to move forward, ladies and gentlemen, and let's move forward exercising faith and optimism that we can kill the elephant. We each have a responsibility to embrace the goals as articulated in the agreement. Let us persevere and resolve that failure will not be an option as we continue this journey of nation building. God bless you all. Thank you.
We now invite Staff Sergeant Leroy Newell from the Jamaican Military Band to give us an instrumental performance. Thank you so much. And as he played along, I'm sure some were singing and recognizing the words are fitting. One of the key elements of the partnership process is an opportunity for members across our civil society landscape to have voice. And this is absolutely critical in the pursuit of national consensus. And at this time, we're going to hear the voices of 4 of our partners, after which you'll hear the voice of our 5th partner, the Most Honorable Andrew Honus. But let me ask at this point that the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards, followed by Mrs. Helene Davis-White, and Reverend Richards is President of the Jamaica Council of Churches. Mrs. Helen Davis-White is the President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions. Mr. Keith Duncan is President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica. And Mr. Mark Golding is the leader of Jamaica's opposition. Can I ask in that order that these individuals come forward to the mic and give us their affirmations as partners of our national partnership?
Your Excellencies, our Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, fellow signing partners, and all distinguished guests. Civil society, recognizing that the severity of Jamaica's social and economic problems requires a national call to action, commits to initiating and supporting national efforts to deliver inclusive, equitable, and sustainable economic growth, improve justice and security, enhance gender equality, empower young people, protect the environment, improve educational and public health outcomes, promote accountability and transparency, and harness the positive contributions and resources of the Jamaican diaspora.
Your Excellencies, Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, other invited guests, this is the affirmation from the trade union movement. The trade union movement reaffirming that innovative solutions are needed to the issues of low productivity, lack of trust between management and workers, gender equality, recognizing creative capacity and enhancement of the well-being and rights of workers, including the right to decent work and due process, commits to initiating and collaborating in the identification of such solutions.
Good evening, good evening. First trip to King's House, His Excellencies, Prime Minister Andrew Honus, Honorable Mark Golding, Opposition Leader, Ministers of Government, partners, good evening. The private sector affirms that economic growth should be established on the pillars of inclusiveness, equity, and sustainability. Secondly, we affirm that our leadership should be accountable, provide informed leadership while demonstrating unimpeachable integrity. We also affirm that the private sector will seek consensus on the prioritization of Jamaica's major challenges and the identification of solutions and development opportunities. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Sir Patrick Allen, Lady Allen, Prime Minister, Ministers of Government, partners in this partnership, members of the media, other distinguished guests. The opposition affirms that it is committed to, as a responsible opposition, seeking to be a productive and constructive partner in identifying and implementing solutions to Jamaica's deep problems, while at the same time performing our constitutional role of holding the government to account and defending the Constitution of the Jamaica and the rights of the Jamaican people under the Constitution. We recognize that at Jamaica's stage of development, there are many things which require a national approach, a Jamaica approach, as opposed to a fragmented, politicized, antagonistic or adversarial approach. And we are committed to playing our part in trying to identify what those are, as has been done in this agreement, and being constructive partners in those areas of common ground. Even within those areas of common ground, there may be issues where we won't always agree on matters of detail or even matters of principle or policy, but we are committed to the idea of working together to fashion solutions in the interest of the country, rather than adopting an approach which is essentially divisive and counterproductive. So that is our affirmation.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you'll all join with me again, giving a round of applause to our partners for their affirmations, for hearing their voices, and recognizing that, as Peter Phillips would have said, the business of nation building is the business of the nation. With that, can I invite our partners who have given their affirmations and Prime Minister Honus, who heads our government, to come up to the table so we actually can have the signing agreement that goes along with those voiced affirmations. When the Partnership Coordinating Committee that was involved in preparing the Partnership for Jamaica Agreement in 2013 met with ministers with responsibility for the focal areas, the most enthusiastic such minister was the then Minister of Justice. His name is Mark Golding, and it is my absolute delight to ask him to come and bring remarks on behalf of the opposition.
Thank you very much, Prof. Your Excellency Lady Allen, Prime Minister, Ministers of Government, Partnership Partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. It's not often you get a second bite of the cherry, but such is my luck today. I must say how much I appreciate Professor Wint's account of the role in which our leaders since independence have sought to find common ground and bring the country together. It is not often that our leaders are portrayed in that way. You know, politicians are generally the subject of a fair amount of negative commentary, and that's not to say much of that is not warranted. But if you step back and you look at our history, you'll see that there have been important eras of national life where we have collaborated in the best interests of the country and have moved the country forward. As has been said, our country was, leading up to that process, bedeviled by serious political violence. And we have managed, through attentiveness to the need to be responsible and to maintain consensus around the electoral process, we've managed to largely eliminate political violence in this country. That is not to say in the heat of elections there are not occasional incidents, there are, but political violence as a phenomenon that we knew in the decades leading up to 1980 and culminating in that terrible year are behind us. Similarly, we have a Charter of Rights that required bipartisan consensus to happen because of the rules of amending our Constitution. For most things that are of significance, they require the support of both sides of the aisle. And the Charter of Rights, which gave us not a perfect, but a much more modern framework for the protection of the rights of our citizens, was another achievement through bipartisanship. Prof. Wint has mentioned ESET, the entity that was established in the lead up to the passing of the Electricity Act of 2015 and enshrined, though it has a different name, but the essence of it is enshrined in that act, which was a significant social construct that enabled us to achieve investment in large volumes of investment, to transition from being wholly dependent on oil, essentially, and derivatives from oil, to renewables and, of course, LNG, a process which is not complete, but which really started out of ESET. And then the fiscal precipice that we faced how many years ago, and the solution around that, the difficult choices that had to be made, restructuring of public debt, significant tax reform, including additional taxes, to take us from an unsustainable fiscal path to one where there is consensus around the medium-term objectives of debt sustainability. Again, and the formulation of EPOC, which was a social construct to monitor and keep the public abreast of the delivery on the commitments that were made under that agreement, is another success story. And we have CMOC, which my predecessor, Dr. Phillips, was instrumental in advocating for, and the Prime Minister obviously came on board as well. And that is an entity which needs to be revitalized and refreshed, and so that it can continue to achieve multipartisanship, not bipartisanship, but multipartisanship in the challenging issue of our time in Jamaica, which is, of course, the very, very high levels of homicide involving mainly guns, which are not made here, and getting to grips with that problem. And the opposition is committed to playing our role in fashioning national solutions. We must do so with a critical eye. Ultimately, that's our responsibility, and we are not going to renege on our responsibility to ensure that the interests of the Jamaican people are maintained, and that we bring that level of accountability through a critical eye to what's happening. But criticism is not the same thing as undermining or destabilizing genuine effort to achieve progress. We are not going to engage in that. Where we're critical, it is because we see that as a necessary and responsible position for us to take on a particular point of principle. And that will be maintained because we are in a Westminster-style democracy, and the role of the opposition is to bring that critical eye and to advocate accordingly. But I'm very happy to be at this historic occasion, the third such agreement being signed, the first for me. And I know a lot of work went into this. I want to commend Minister Green, who I understand is the minister responsible within the government for this particular process. And the fact that we're at the table, I'm sure many other people put in a lot of effort to get us this far. And it's just a renewal of a principle of how we operate as a nation, as a maturing democracy, where we take off the table of competitive political activity things which can be better solved for a better national outcome through consensus, and we build that consensus. And that requires authentic, honest, and genuine and respectful dialogue. It won't work if it's just based on posturing or empty words, water in your mouth while you talk, as I would say. It must be a real thing as to how we engage with each other, accepting and protecting that principle of trying to find common ground and move the country forward accordingly. So, Prime Minister, it's my pleasure to be here with you today and to put my signature on the document on behalf of the opposition. I look forward to your affirmation, which we'll hear shortly, and to the rest of the persons who are here and the wider public. Let us move forward together and try and move beyond some of our very deep problems where we can, through a spirit of consensus, dialogue, mutual understanding, all in the best interests of Jamaica, land we love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Golden. Really appreciate it. The test really of this bipartisanship spirit is really in the transition between being an opposition leader and a prime minister. And Prime Minister Honus has done that extremely well. In 2013, there was a forum that looked at Jamaica's pending IMF program and he was, in his capacity as leader of the opposition, attending that forum. And he stated publicly at the time that his would be, and he used the exact same words that Mark Golding just used, his would be a responsible opposition. And he was true to that commitment. Leader Golding, President Golding, also mentioned the electricity sector enterprise team. And that entity was brilliantly led by Dr. Vin Lawrence, who was very fond of the color of green as it was represented in the Calabar tie, or the Calabar school colors. But when the administration changed in 2016, as far as I can tell, the first individual with whom Prime Minister Holness met in his new capacity as Prime Minister was the then chairman of ESET, Dr. Vin Lawrence, with an extraordinarily smooth transition across administrations, in part because the team had really tried to keep the opposition apprised, but also because, Prime Minister, of your commitment to do what is necessary in the interests of the country. And there have been many other examples, but I'm not going to repeat them all now. What I'm going to do is to invite you to the podium to give your statement.
Thank you, Professor Wint, and congratulations on your National Honor Award. Let me also, I'm afraid Excellency, you would forgive me, I'm destroying your podium. And let me also acknowledge Reverend Lenworth Anglin for his prayers. Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, our Governor General and Lady Allen, Mr. Mark Golding, Leader of the Opposition and signing partner, the Honorable Floyd Green, Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, and Minister with special responsibility for the National Partnership Council coordination, other members of the Cabinet who are here, members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards, Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Kingston and President of the Jamaica Council of Churches, another signing partner, Mrs. Helene Davis White, President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, another signing partner, and Mr. Keith Duncan, President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, another signing partner. Public sector executives and officials, permanent secretaries, and I'm not certain if the Cabinet Secretary is here. I'm not seeing the Cabinet Secretary. Members of the National Partnership Council and the Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, and those who are listening to us in social media, good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to be here this afternoon, participating in the signing ceremony of a new partnership agreement. Partnership for Jamaica's strong and sustainable recovery. I thank Your Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, our Governor General, for once again, for the third time, hosting us at King's House to sign our National Partnership Agreement. It is important that the signing takes place here at King's House. It is a symbol that this is a national effort, that this is an act of the state versus an act of the government. Very important. It may take a little bit of explanation, and so I will attempt to make some clarifying remarks on that. In our system, the Governor General, the head of the state, is not political. The Governor General does not have to think about votes and elections. The Governor General represents the uncontested space, represents the dignity and efficiency of the state and its arms and the bureaucracy and systems. And the state, it's not merely those parts of it that form the public service. The state also includes our civil society, our private sector, our general citizenry. That is what defines Jamaica. And too often we tend to believe that the government is the entirety of the state, which is not the case. And in a democracy, it is important that all the functionaries of the state play their important role in achieving prosperity. And that is why we're here today, to officially exemplify in signing a document to say all the members of our great Jamaican state will work together for a partnership for Jamaica's strong and sustainable recovery. Now note, there is no law that is going to force us to work together. This is not a law. There is no legal consequence for us not working together. And indeed, there might even be no political consequence for not working together. But the important point for us to grasp here is that, yes, the state functions on laws and the consideration of the political consequence. But the state is also what we commit to do. It's what we as a people say we will do. It is what we do without supervision. It is what we do without public scrutiny or fear of consequence. And so each signing partner here today is signing of their own free will, is making their own commitment to saying we're going to work together for Jamaica's strong and sustainable recovery. So the process of partnership is very important. Sometimes a conversation would want to diminish it. Partnership is of no value, really. It's just a talk shop. That is not the case. For persons who truly understand how the state works, they would immediately grasp the importance of creating this opportunity, this symbolic show of the commitment of all the actors in our state. So, Excellency, thank you once again for providing King's House, the symbol of our state, and your office as the platform on which we all come together in the uncontested space of the Jamaican state to look about the best interest and affairs of the country. I left my speech here before I took the podium, and the leader of the opposition came to speak before me. I suspect that he may have read a few lines. I suspect he may have read a few lines from my speech. Nonetheless, there are a few other points which I will make, except to say that I'm always very happy to hear when the leader of the opposition said, we will work together. And we look forward to working together with the opposition to solve some of our challenging problems. You mentioned crime and violence, particularly gun violence. Those are some issues, yes, that we will deal with. But when we were forming this agreement, we looked at the entirety of the Jamaican situation. And at the time when the agreement was being crafted, we were just emerging from the pandemic. Indeed, the partnership process suffered during the pandemic, and I want to thank the members of the partnership for understanding. I'm seeing various partnership members here, and I want to personally and publicly thank you for being understanding, for being patient, and for being committed to the process. We weren't able to meet sometimes for an extended period. We met online, and it was sometimes very difficult to conduct those online meetings, but members stuck with it, and the partnership survived. So the partnership then, this new partnership, arose out of concerns of the economic fallout and the social fallout as well from the COVID-19 pandemic. I wish to take the opportunity to highlight the fact that, 6 months out since we have brought an end to the DRMA, somehow I think the public, some members of the public would have just totally forgotten that we had a pandemic, which had a significant impact on our national budget, on our economy, on our education system, on infrastructure projects. In fact, today I was noticing some conversations in social media regarding garbage collection, which is a topical issue and one that the government is very concerned about. The government made a budgetary allocation of several $100 million to purchase 100 garbage trucks that would significantly improve garbage collection in the country. Significantly. 100 trucks would immediately solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing now. But because of the pandemic, we had to make some decisions regarding the resources that we had. And we had to divert resources from that in order to be able to treat with the health issues that arose in the pandemic. So we were not able to bring the trucks in at the time. Since then, we have made another allocation, and we have 50 garbage trucks coming. I saw the pictures of them. They are being shipped from the production source in, I believe it is, well, I won't say the country where they're coming from, but they're being shipped from the production source. It will take 40 days to get here, a few more days to clear, and a few more days to get into our garbage collection processes here. I make the point just as an example of how the pandemic has affected our economy affected government, affected your daily lives, and how long-lasting the effect has been even after we have ended the Disaster Risk Management Act measures. During the pandemic, several issues would have arose, and I found it particularly beneficial to have had the counsel of the partnership, to update the partnership, to bring issues to the partnership. It was a very helpful forum for the exchange of ideas, a very useful forum to resolve disputes, a very useful forum to explore solutions, and a very useful forum to gain deeper understanding and move towards consensus. So the partnership has been very useful to Jamaican democracy, without question. If we did not have the partnership, it is clear that the actors in our state might diverge, as we always do, but there would never be a point where we could converge and deliberate and come to consensus. And for the 3 times that we're now going to be signing the partnership agreement, it is a true symbol of the maturing and growth of our democracy. There are not many countries that have this form of partnership institution that keeps their state together in a unified way. And we can be very proud of that. As I had said before, during our Jamaica 68 celebrations, Jamaica can be proud that we have had a politics that has led to consensus on critical issues. You mentioned some of them. For example, the Electoral Commission, the consensus on fiscal management, the consensus on ending political violence, which was a part of the ECJ development. We have had many such consensus. We now are in the process of building consensus around how we're going to recover now from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the recovery, strong and sustainable, has 5 elements to it. We say 5 Ps. Prosperity. This will be achieved through championing the recommendations of the COVID-19 Economic Task Force report to ensure that employment, growth, and productivity targets are met. Immediately as the pandemic struck, the government put together an economic recovery task force with private sector leaders, other sector players, and several important recommendations were made, which we are now in the process of implementing. And the partnership will give oversight to that, and will be a forum in which we can explore how these recommendations can be accelerated in terms of their implementation. Peace. And that goes to the challenge that we are facing now in combating violent crimes in Jamaica, public order and safety, corruption and other unfairness and injustices in our society. I think we are making progress, slow progress, but progress nonetheless, in treating with the issue of peace. I think the passing of the new firearm legislation is an important step in the right direction. Very soon we will be bringing to Parliament the Bail Act, and there are other measures which will come before our Parliament, and there are other measures for which our security forces will inform the nation later on. The third element of our partnership for a strong and sustainable recovery would be people. And our people must be empowered to realize their full potential. We will work to implement the recommendations of the Education Transformation Commission that was chaired by Professor Orlando Patterson. We will invest in improving the system of health care for all our people. And already we have started with that investment. Minister Tufton would have outlaid a national project to build out new hospitals and clinic facilities, and that should start early next year. We will redouble our efforts to provide decent housing for our people. And we have been very ambitious in our housing policies and programs. And in fact, I am confident that we will be building more houses than we built in the last term, and we will be building more houses than ever before in Jamaica. But in this regard, the private sector is an absolutely important partner. So we will continue to put in place the policies and the measures to develop houses through government's effort, but to partner with the private sector to ensure that more houses can come to market for Jamaicans to be able to purchase a piece of Jamaica and live in decency and comfort. And we will continue to do what is necessary to assist the most vulnerable in our society. And we have been doing this through the pandemic in terms of supporting the most vulnerable. We will continue to support the most vulnerable through our various programs, including the PATH program, our HOPE program, and other government initiatives to ensure that the most vulnerable is not left behind in our strong and sustainable recovery. The fourth P in our partnership is planet. We will support initiatives to protect and restore our environment and natural resources, especially those that reduce climate vulnerabilities. And this government has been very active in the climate change space. And in fact, we have mainstreamed in everything that we're doing climate considerations, particularly in the build-out of public infrastructure. And the final P is partnership. We will promote a culture of dialogue and collaboration and multi-stakeholder cooperation. This is not new, this is what we have committed to. So that is the strategy. Prosperity, peace, people, planet, partnership. We believe and we affirm that Jamaica's progress can be retarded by a divisive political climate, and we commit to bring genuine, transparent, and accountable bipartisanship to national life. And we commit to long-term national goals rather than to short-term political imperatives. And we seek to engender trust and confidence in the national processes with due attention paid to the elimination of corruption in all its forms. This is the affirmation and commitment of the government of Jamaica to the national partnership process, to our new partnership for a strong and sustainable recovery. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And you may have been wondering when the affirmations were read that you didn't see an affirmation from the government partner. It was tied in to the Prime Minister's speech. And so at the end of the speech, he gave us the government's affirmation and commitment. And we are truly appreciative, Prime Minister. I just wanted to add that the Prime Minister spoke of the COVID-19 challenge and the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force. And I just want to point out that that task force, Prime Minister, and I really applaud you for the design, is certainly unprecedented in Jamaica and may be unprecedented elsewhere because it was a task force that comprised 7 ministers of government, several of whom I see in the audience today, in collaboration with civil society leaders. It was an excellent idea because the typical task force process creates a potential implementation gap as task force members provide their recommendations to ministers. And the implementation gap was eliminated in that process because the implementers were fundamentally a part of the process. And it really reflects the social partnership at work in a most dramatic and impactful way. And I want to congratulate you, Prime Minister, and your designers, and of course the chair of that task force, very, very ably chaired by the Honourable Minister of Finance, Dr. Nigel Clark. So thank you again, Prime Minister. One of the other things we want to thank you for is for your recognition of finding the right leadership for the partnership process. And it's a leadership that it's a challenging job at the ministerial level, and it requires a lot of different competencies. It requires a lot of energy. It requires the ability to interact with all groups. And it's sort of helpful if you have a chronological advantage in that process. And I really want to congratulate you on the appointment of Minister Green, who has served for the last several months now, Minister, as the coordinator of the Partnership Council. He has come to the position with tremendous energy. He spent time talking with all of the social partners, trying to understand their concerns as he sought then to bring those concerns into a process that would involve the development of this new partnership agreement. And we are here in large part because of the fervor and passion and dedication that Minister Green has applied to this effort. And so against that background, it is my absolute pleasure, Minister, to invite you to deliver the vote of thanks.
His Excellency, the Most Honourable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General, and Lady Allen, Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, Mr. Mark Golden, Leader of the Opposition, Cabinet colleagues, members of the Social Partnership, other invited guests, members of the media. Good afternoon, everybody. So I am honoured to be here to move the vote of thanks at this, our signing ceremony for the new Social Partnership Agreement, as we set out for a partnership for Jamaica's strong and sustainable recovery. Starting in March of this year, under the direction of the Most Honourable Prime Minister, I spent 6 weeks carrying out a series of consultations with members of the National Partnership Council. This was with a view to gather from them the strengths and weaknesses of our social partnership and any reforms that could help in strengthening the partnership. From those meetings, we engaged in a new consultative process and a new partnership to span the next 4 years. We are cognizant as a government that to become a better Jamaica, we will have to work together to achieve these goals. So this agreement is a step towards strengthening the Council and supporting its work and to build consensus around critical areas that affect Jamaica. Again, Prime Minister, under your direction, we have analyzed these strengths and weaknesses, and the partnership agreement comes with a new communications framework, which will ensure that the general public and our stakeholders are fully apprised of the work of the partnership, including a quarterly newsletter, press release, press conferences, and consistent media engagement. We want to ensure that the public is aware and confident in the work being done by the partnership. So allow me to take this opportunity to start by thanking our most honorable Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, who is committed to this process and who has tasked the team to continue to strengthen the partnership. I have to also say a special thanks to Mrs. Susan Leslie Bailey, who acts as head of our secretariat, and of course Merle Donaldson, our partners who so graciously and frankly spoke about the strengths and weaknesses of the partnership, and especially the National Partnership Council Coordinating Committee for pulling this agreement together. We do have a new structure with an expanded partnership committee, and it stands to note that our partnership council includes not only the opposition and our trade unions and clergy and private sector, but includes our youth, includes our women, includes academia, and of course our environmental groups. I want to thank Professor Wint for his excellent job of guiding us through today's proceedings. I think the lesson that you started with, Professor, was wonderful in relation to highlighting how leadership can really create a framework for partnership. Of course, I thank all the partners for signing in representative capacities, the leader of the opposition, and I will thank Anthony Hilton, who sits on the Partnership Council on behalf of the opposition. I thank our Governor General and Lady Allen for hosting us, and I think the Prime Minister said it perfectly. A function of this nature had to be at King's House to show that this is a partnership for all of Jamaica. Finally, as partners, we will work to herald in a new era with our 5 strategic pillars, which have been aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and which reflects our own Vision 2030. As the Prime Minister has rightly said, a partnership of prosperity, a partnership of peace, a partnership of people, a partnership of planet, and a solid partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And again, I really want to thank all who have been present at these proceedings. We really appreciate your presence. And your presence is linked to the fact that almost everyone here has been working very, very hard to make this process work through one form or another. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our proceedings for the evening. I understand that there will be picture opportunities, possibly with the Governor General, His Excellency, and there are also refreshments that are available. But let me thank you so very much, and why don't we stand for the formal departure of their Excellencies.